Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to All Things Cybersecurity. I will be your host for this lovely endeavor that we're partaking in today, and you'll notice that I'm minus one person, Sophia. We'll all just sit here and take a moment to reflect our missing of her. We'll look forward to having her back on the next time, but she is busy, so she was unable to make it for us today. But don't worry, we'll hold it against her and we'll make fun of her horribly. That said, you know the deal. You know the drill. What we're doing here is it's a webinar where you get to ask us questions. And when I say us, we'll get to that in just a moment. And we answer. We talk about all things cybersecurity. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, you have some great questions waiting for us in the wings. And by us, I mean myself and Mr. Jason Downey from Red Siege. If you don't know Red Siege, boy, you're doing it wrong. And you need to check it out because a man right here, he's on the team. He knows what's up. He is a security consultant with them and does a lot of really cool stuff in his day job. Jason, how's it going, sir? And thanks for coming.
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, really excited to talk all things cybersecurity.
Have you ever had your head on a giant screen like this before?
Ooh, no, definitely not that big.
It's a big. We call it the BAM, which stands for big
big.
something
Yep.
monitor. You get the
Yeah,
idea, right?
I get the idea.
Yeah. But man, I'm really excited to have you on. I look forward to any time we have someone of your caliber, especially the folks at Red Seed. You guys are just insanely good and smart at all the things you do. So it's really cool to have you come on and be able to lend your expertise and your experience, your thoughts, your opinions, all that stuff to our audience is going to be able to benefit greatly from that. I know I sure will. To just hear from your perspective and your experiences is just it's a gold mine, really, for us that are trying to get into cybersecurity, are in it, but want to, skill up, level up, move into some other direction. So it's a big thank you for joining us today.
Oh, no problem. And it always feels really good to be able to give a little bit back. Because I remember back in the day when I was really scraping for, my first pen test job. And it was sort of like the generosity of other people that took time to explain what their lives were like to me, that made my journey easier. So anytime I've got a chance to do that, to pass that on, like I'm more than happy to. So yeah, this whole thing's great.
See, ladies and gentlemen, that's why Jason's awesome. Be like Jason. Give back every chance you possibly can, because that's how this community grows. We really are a community of people that love to share their experiences and their knowledge. So if you know somebody that's in the business, ask them questions that I'm sure they'll be glad to answer them. We sure are. We love talking about this stuff. It's why we do this, right? Because it's fun. At least it should be. If it's not fun, something's going wrong. We need to fix that. Speaking of fun, Jason, I like to kick things off with an interesting question, and I
Okay.
always get an interesting answer for this question. It's actually kind of a two-part question, but we'll see how it goes. What I like to ask of all my guests is, are you satisfied with your current skill level? And if not, which I'm assuming is the answer, what are you currently doing to remedy that situation?
Oh, so yeah, so it's a constant battle, right? Of the more you know, the less you understand. Like I remember when I first started pen testing, I had like 20 things in a list. I'm like, when I learn these 20 things, I will be a good pen tester. Since then, I've learned those 20 things, and now that list has like 400 things. So while I'm very satisfied in a sense with my progress, I'm not satisfied with where I am and eventually want to be. That being said, the things that I'm really focusing on, is really just trying to just more of my coding background. I'm kind of to the point where, if I'm trying to like evade some antivirus and, an endpoint detection response, like I got to be able to code my own stuff. And for me personally, that's just always been a sore spot. So that's my kind of my big focus for the next, 6 months to the year.
Yeah, yeah, we almost invariably get someone asking about coding and how important is that to the cybersecurity person? And honestly, that could come from a blue perspective all the way to a red perspective. And I've really just started kind of putting it out there like it's kind of one of those core skills at this point where even if you're starting in IT, I would say I'm not saying you got to go be a full stack dev, but pick something easy like Python, maybe Bash, maybe both. They could probably interchange between the two pretty easily.
Mhm.
Nice little sprinkle of PowerShell and just figure out how to do the easy stuff like create a variable and, do some conditional logic like for loops and if then kind of statements. You figure that kind of stuff out, and that's going to pay off in dividends big time once you get into cybersecurity because now, like you say, you jump into this thing and you're trying to get past an AV or EDR solution, and it's going,
Mhm.
I see what you're doing there, and I know what that is,
Yep.
and that's not going to work. So you got to have to kind of code your way around that, and building your own custom stuff is basically the superpower that you need to do that. Correct?
Absolutely. And to your first point, the idea of starting out with a scripting language like Python, if you're doing any kind of security at scale, if you're doing any kind of admin work or network work on more than one device or five devices, like you have to have that skill set. Maybe not on day one, but the 15th time you do the same thing on a device in back to back to back, you're going to wish you had a way to automate it. And if you can create your own automation way, that'll save you so much time throughout your, IT career, whatever that looks like. And to the second point, yeah, a lot of the way that we get popped by AV and EDR is by previously signatured stuff. The days of ever using like a Metasploit payload are done because it's been caught 47,000 times by every security vendor. So you can't use those anymore. And then even if you use some of the more open source stuff, like it gets caught a whole lot. The first time someone's like, does this work? And they upload it to Virus Total, and then Virus Total then reports it back to all the vendors, right? Like it's now signatured. So the ability to kind of code your own or have resources to be able to code your own to evade some of that stuff is important when trying to get to that next level.
I love how like every open source C2 framework is like, do not upload this to VirusTotal. Do not like it's all over the place. Just do not
Yeah.
upload this virus. We need this tool, so stop doing that.
Yep.
But the people that are coming in are playing with it, and they know that VirusTotals, if it, and you've probably seen this as well. I see a lot of, hey, I built a FUD or fully undetectable whatever thing, and I can prove that to you because look, I popped it into VirusTotal and I went from 30 signatures down to 1 or 0 or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you did, but tomorrow that 1 is gonna be 30 again.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's this weird cat and mouse game that we have to play. And if we're just kind of building our own tools, that would you say that kind of becomes our own personal secret sauce on, yeah, because I'm not going to release this out to my GitHub, right? I'm not going to put this out in the wild
Mm.
because then it gets burned, right?
Well, so it and I think there's two different schools of thought on that. The idea that like us as Reg Siege, we don't necessarily keep any of our secret sauce
Hmm.
because ultimately our goal is like, we kind of have like the Tron mentality, right? Like we fight for the users. So if we've figured out a way to evade, we do want to share that with the community so that, like our pen testy friends can have some success because then ultimately that shows the blue teamy folks that there's something that they are missing, that whatever solution they have in place is missing. And so the goal is still, yeah, to be able to do better on pen tests, but the ultimate goal is to make our clients have a safer environment to protect their users.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Like that's we tend to forget that because it's almost like we're playing a game, and the goal of the game is to win. But we forget the ultimate goal of the winning move, right? Is to have a fully secure system that
Mhm.
any attacker out there or threat actor is thinking of trying to compromise the system would have a very difficult time. So much so that they're probably not going to avoid detection before they get too far down the road. That's what we really want at the end of the day. But it's how do we get to where the systems are intuitive enough where no matter what tool we build, it can kind of see, oh, I see what you're doing, and that's wrong. That seems to be what the major issue is when it comes to, okay, yeah, of course I can't use Cobalt Strike beacons anymore because they get popped. So I'm going to build my own, and now it doesn't get popped, even though it's basically the same thing because it's malleable, right? I build my own C2 beacon um, for Cobalt Strike. How do we get to where it doesn't matter how I mangle this thing, it's going to get picked up?
Well, I think ultimately the answer is you're never there, right? Like you mentioned, that always it's a cat and mouse game where there will be some new technique that us as pretend bad guys and actual bad guys are doing for maybe weeks or months, and then eventually it gets caught, and then we all have to up our trade craft, and then eventually that gets caught, and we up again, and then that gets caught, and there's just always going to be, like new techniques out there. We do on our assumed breach style tests. Typically it's something like we, start with a cobalt strike beacon, and then move from there. On the test that we're working on this week, my coworker actually, Windows now has built-in SSH. So if you have a client that doesn't have, any sort of real egress filtering in place, you can now theoretically operate through that SSH tunnel without actually having any sort of beacon on the system and be able to interact with their environment in a way that they can't see because
It's all
it's
encrypted.
SSH.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's encrypted.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fun part of doing cybersecurity. You always find these weird ways and go, well, if you're picking me up this way, what if we did this? And then
Mhm.
we try something new and fangle on. And it's funny. It starts off almost intuitively, like I feel like this should work. I feel like if we went that way, and then it just becomes I'm going to not sleep for 3 days until I figure this out. And you get laser focused. You laugh because you know
Absolutely.
exactly what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, right? Yeah, that's just
Right.
kind of the thing of it. So very interesting. Very, I like your answer. I think it's very helpful to have that perspective and start thinking about that. How do we level up our skills, and like what are the professionals doing to do the same thing that we as beginners are trying to do as well? So let's go ahead and start jumping into. We have a couple of questions already rolling in from the various and sundry places that people are watching and enjoying this at. So let's start from we've got Mabel from YouTube. She asks, "What's the most surprising thing you learned after you became a security specialist?" That's a great question.
So the number one thing that I think really surprised me, becoming a full-time pen tester, and just as a little bit of background, Red Siege is we are a consultancy firm. So I'm touching a new client environment every week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on the length of the engagement. And reading about pen testers and all of like their sexy stories of all these really cool ways they did wild stuff. I was really surprised by how often the basics still come into play. Things like weak passwords or how I probably escalate privilege more than or gain any sort of initial access more than any other function. Um, Things like simply segmenting your network really stops a lot of things that I want to do on a network, right? If I'm network segmented, I literally can't reach other hosts. There's no place to go. A lot of places have really large, crazy, robust security programs and great people and good training, but still this basic stuff gets overlooked. And the amount of successes that we see from that is a lot higher than what I would have expected.
Yeah, it's crazy. We were today. I was working on doing an update for an OWASP top 10 course for the web app vulnerabilities, and we got to I think it was identification or identity and authentication failures. And the exploit we basically ran was the fact that you're using like a default password. And I had our my friend Justin. He came in as a contractor. He was kind of building a web app, and we were using that for demonstration purposes. I said, "Do me a favor, go to Google and type in top passwords of 2023." And it's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
completely ridiculous. I mean, you would think that it was a joke, like that I was pulling up some sort of joke page where it's 1 2 3 4 5 6 and password one and dumb things like that. But we still end up doing that. Those things still find themselves in our networks. And of course, how often would you say you run into the fact that people reuse their password?
All the time. And even if it's not a direct reuse,
Hmm.
so my personal thought is the idea of rotating passwords every 90 days or so is kind of a stupid idea. Because if you have a password and then you have the number one on the end, that's whatever you picked. If you got to rotate it in 90 days, I mean, pretty much most of the audience probably agrees with me. They're probably going to pick, password 2,
Right.
right? And then password 3, or they had maybe an exclamation point at the end because it's in the top left corner of the keyboard, and now it's password at symbol and then password number sign. I like how to look down on my keyboard to verify, right?
Yeah. What are those keys again? Yeah.
um, but we think those things are more secure, but they're not. And us as attackers, like we're immediately honed in on that. The even if you're not directly doing password reuse, even that small rotation, it's still just as bad. And then for direct sort of password reuse, oftentimes like we will find someone that's used their work email to sign up for some third party service, and that third party service got breached. It's like, sure, Chase Bank has never been breached, probably pretty good security. But if you signed up on like, xboxhackingforum.com or something, right? And then they got popped and that password is in use across the board, forget Chase's $1 billion security program. I have your username and password because you gave it to me somewhere else.
You just walk right through the front door at that point. Right.
Absolutely.
There is no security at that point because
Mhm.
the system believes you are that person. You have presented the correct credentials. What else is it supposed to think? Right. Does that you are that person and you now have all the rights and privileges therein. And I think this is a really good segue into our next, because this might actually be the answer, but we'll go ahead and go to the next question, which comes from another YouTube viewer. It says Tobert, but maybe it's Robert. It could be a fat finger there. So Tobert or Robert, whoever you may be, coming from YouTube, you've asked, what is the most common vulnerability that you do encounter?
I mean, definitely the weak passwords.
Just junk passwords.
Yeah, because almost every large environment, um, I mean, if a company has 40,000 employees and no sort of like real strong, strict, long, specific long password requirements, I mean, we're either going to guess one, via password spraying, or we'll find a way to crack it if we find a way to get hashes. Yeah, passwords is still the most common vulnerability, assuming we exclude like the conversation on human vulnerability and social engineering and all that jazz.
What's your opinion on like, why do you think that is the case? How is it that we've been using passwords for 50 years now, however long like modern computing has been a thing, and that normal
Mhm.
people have had access to it, and they know. I guarantee you ask Joe on the street, what do you know what a bad password is? Oh yeah, like password.
Mhm.
Yes, or using a default. And yet it still happens. What's
Yeah.
your opinion on that? Why is this still a thing?
Um, I think it's because some places it's difficult, right? We have to have 50 different passwords for 50 different places, and they have 50 different requirements, and it's impossible to make them all random and remember them all without using something like a password manager. So my first piece of pen test, right, is use a password manager, something like 1Password, and store these crazy long 30 character passwords. And that way you only have to remember one secure one. But yeah, it seems like we get lazy. It's impossible to remember. So we have to use these passwords that are easy to remember,
I,
that
I
can be duplicated and came back to. Yeah.
I remember when password managers started, like when they became a thing, and then now they're starting to get more and more into just common parlance. Everybody kind of knows that they're out there, and of course, LastPass had its whole debacle just a few I guess months ago at this point.
Mhm.
Um, but I was really hoping that this would be the thing that password managers, and maybe it still is. Maybe we just haven't, eclipsed over to the other side of the dark side of the moon on this yet. Where somebody asked me, "What's your password to your bank?" I don't know. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
I have no idea. Yeah,
Couldn't tell. Gun to
yeah,
my head, and I couldn't tell you.
could tell you.
Yeah, never gonna happen. And that
Mhm.
and the reason is because the password manager not only stores my passwords, but it can help me create a password. And when I say help me, he goes, "Here's a 37 character password with all the requirements you need to make it difficult to brute force, copy, paste, sign up."
Yeah,
That
and I think that the general population is just a little bit, they're always a little bit behind on the the new security hotness, right? And
yeah.
password managers are slowly making their way down. If you're out there and you're listening and you're not using a password manager, that should be the number one thing that you do at the end of this conversation, is like, go do that. One piece of security advice is use a password manager and keep yourself safe, not just for your business and corporate life, but for your personal life as well.
Have you seen an uptick in password manager use in your engagements?
Um, yes. I mean,
I was hoping it was gonna be
I'm
yes.
thinking,
Yes, I
yeah, I
have.
mean, yes, yeah. And really, I think, more of our clients, a lot of, like, especially with a lot of our repeat clients, we're not able to pop them on that easy stuff anymore. Because hey, we burnt you in 2021 on some weak passwords. We got you again in 2022. Maybe we came back this year, right? And it's like, oh well, we weren't able to crack any of your passwords because congratulations, all your admins are now have 40-character passwords that are, I'm assuming they're not remembering. So
Yeah.
I would say yes. Password man, yes, yes.
Okay,
It's
good.
just more use.
I'm glad to hear it. I am glad to, because otherwise we were about to start a campaign, man. We're going to take out ads because this has got to end, this whole bad password business.
Sure.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Good to hear. But so, unfortunately, it is still one of the more common things, but hopefully we're starting to see some light at the end of that tunnel and
Mhm.
people are starting to get hip to things like password managers. All right, let's go to our next question. This one comes from Lori on LinkedIn. She asks, what certs do cybersecurity analysts need? I want to level up from just being in 2 years of support help desk. So, do you come from a help desk background? And if so, what was your
Yeah,
path?
yeah, so I do. So, yeah, my path is I started off on a general help desk, and then I actually went to like a network administration role. So I immediately jumped into like CCNA land, eventually CCNA security back when they had it, transferred to a firewall security person, and then eventually onto pen testing a couple years later. But as far as a security analyst, when I think of security analyst, I think of somebody that works in like a security like a SOC, a security operations center. Um, and the idea is in a security operations center, you're probably going to see and touch a whole lot of things. So something like a security plus, as sort of as inch deep and mile wide as it might be, will sort of give you a great overview of just general security fundamentals. Um, and it never actually like worked in a SOC as security. I can't think of anything more specific than that, unless you want to specialize, in something like network, which you would need like a CCNA or yeah, I guess that's what I got.
Yeah, yeah. Security
Yeah.
Plus, I can't tell you how many people always kind of recommend that as that first step into that cybersecurity world.
Mhm.
And I would agree with that. I think that certification continues to evolve and add new things. And like you say, yeah, it does tend to be an inch deep and a mile wide. It's foundations, right? We got to
Mhm.
get you talking the same language, knowing all the concepts and definitions of things that once you get beyond that, we expect you to already know. But yeah, I have no problem with Security Plus as a great first certification. From my experience, someone who does technical training and trains for definitely blue team level security, it's the stuff that you could use as a SOC analyst. Next step in the CompTIA world would probably be your CISA Plus or CYSA Plus. That certification also continuing to evolve. There's Security Blue Team. They have the Blue Team Level 1 and I believe Blue Team Level 2, but Blue Team Level 1, very good, very hands-on. That stuff is there. A lot of companies now are starting to see the benefits of having some hands-on certifications on the Blue Defender side of things. So there's definitely some stuff coming out there. Those are the first ones that kind of pop into my head right off the top. So check those out. If you are brand spanking new, you're right there. You're at that help desk. You're at the
Mhm.
supports. Definitely just start with Security Plus. It's going to be a great intro for you. At least
Yeah.
I think.
Absolutely. And then sort of an unasked addendum from my side, right, is don't underestimate the power of a home lab.
Mm,
Getting that you mentioned that hands-on, like being able to stand up your own like open source SIEM and firewall and be able to like monitor what different activity on your network looks like. Um, you know, in in roles like cybersecurity analyst and beyond that are typically 95% hands on keyboard. If you can sit in an interview and talk about what you've built and what you've observed and what you've actually done with that, I mean, that's worth its weight in its gold and way more than, a certification could ever give you.
yeah, it's totally a 1-2 punch. I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, is that certs are great, but by themselves aren't going to get you as far as you'd probably like. It's not that it can't happen; it's just less likely. You start adding on to the fact that, oh, I've applied these concepts to my own home lab, and like you said, I've built a Loki seam, and I've done or Alien Vault or what is it, Open SSIM. All these, there's tons of free resources or trial versions of stuff that you can get out there, build you an elk stack, do Kibana, dashboards and all sorts of fun stuff. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about right now, in 3 months' time, you could absolutely have some
Mhm.
hands-on experience with all that, know exactly what I'm saying. And if you go walk into a SOC level 1 job interview, they're going to be like, "Wow, that's impressive. You've got all that going on for you, man. You're definitely a force to be reckoned with, and we're a contender for this this position. So good job, Jason. Thanks for reminding us to don't just think about these things. Don't just get a piece of paper that says I know something about something.
Yep.
Marry it with that hands-on experience.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to our next question. This is coming from YouTube. Again, YouTube is lively today. And this is the user Ghost. Ghost asks, where can I start to learn about cybersecurity? What are some good resources? I'm just going to go ahead and say, I don't know if you can see, but I heard of this company called IT Pro from ACI Learning. They might have a few things that might suit your fancy on this. We train all the major, CompTIA. If you need Microsoft security stuff, we have that as well. Azure. I go into some deep hands-on stuff with hardware hacking, AWS pen testing. Well, I try to give you just a web app pen testing, CEH. You'll see this face a lot. Security Plus, if you're new to the game, you'll see this guy plus a couple of other really talented instructors here at ACI. But we're not the only game in town. Jason, where would you say would be a good resource?
Um, definitely, just Google what you're interested in, and there will be a million things that come up. I mean, there's a wealth of stuff on YouTube, um, that where you can watch videos and have someone break a concept down to you. But sort of coming back to the, building your own lab, right? Like find you a service that either will like give you a scenario to work on and let you work in a lab type deal, or build one yourself. Like for example, when I first started getting into pen testing, I spent a whole lot of time on a site called Hack the Box. And so what Hack the Box is allows you to push a button, it gives you access to a virtual machine, and that virtual machine has some kind of like intentional vulnerability. And so I would then work through my own mental tradecraft of like, how do I scan this box? How do I enumerate the service? How do I exploit the service? How do I privilege escalate on the machine now that I have access? Um, and a lot of that stuff, in a sense, is kind of gimmicky and not super real world applicable a lot. But what it does do is build that muscle memory. That muscle memory of being able to recall knowledge and actually function in front of the keyboard is really great. Don't underestimate the power of like good books too. There's a lot of really good books from No Starch Press out there. They've got a really great cybersecurity selection. So you can, spend 40, $50 on a book and get 300 pages to get you started. That'll be worth its weight in gold.
Oh yeah, No Starch makes some great content. So definitely, if you need some books, you could do worse than No Starch. That's for sure. I'm going to run something by you, Jason. I want to get your input on this because I think about this kind of stuff a lot because my day job is to train people on cybersecurity. I have, I feel, let me make sure I put it out there in the right context. I feel like a lot of people might overlook the idea of listening to something like Siegecast or Wednesday Offensive or All Things Cybersecurity and just immersing themselves. It's almost like learning a language, right? The people that do really well at learning a language immerse themselves into the
Mhm.
culture, immerse themselves. That all they want to hear is that language being spoken. They'll get magazines or go to websites that are all about that country or that language or whatever the case is. I feel like cybersecurity is the same way. You start immersing yourself into the pool and into the culture, and all of a sudden you start hearing things. And this is a weird organic way of learning. This isn't going to be the okay, today we're going to learn a SQL injection. The reason SQL injection works and blah, blah, blah. And you kind of go off the rails there, right? And that's great. And it's absolutely necessary. But I feel like you can really learn fast by going, hey, Daniel and Jason just said something. I have no idea what that is. Let me pull Google out real quick. What is that? Oh, let me go to this Wikipedia page. Oh, look at this blog. And you're kind of following these rabbit trails and pulling on these threads. And you learn a ton from just going, I don't know what they're talking about, but I'm going to go find out. Jason, do you think I'm onto something here or am I just an idiot?
I do, and so I kind of coined the concept a couple of years ago. For those of you that are Legend of Zelda fans, right?
Ah,
You got a Triforce, right? The three
yes.
triangles. And each one of those triangles are different ways that InfoSec will gatekeep you from your first job. They're going to require experience or certifications or education. But in the middle of a Triforce is a big hole, right? And that hole to cut through that gatekeeping is your network. And that's how you immerse, and that's primarily for two reasons. Number one is what you were talking about, Daniel, about that it changes your mentality when you're surrounded by people that are doing the same thing that you do. There's something very specific about being a pen tester where anytime I read about some service, my brain immediately clicks to how can I break that? How can I make that work how it is designed to work? And being with a group of people at Red Siege that also have that same mentality, we're able to go way down those rabbit holes and really find, some cool stuff. And the other sort of piece to that is, when you find your tribe, people that are also trying to break into a SOC role or a pen test job, you can learn and grow together. You can share those resources. You've got positive encouragement, and being surrounded by people that are doing the same thing that you do will keep you motivated and keep you honest. And then really even the last piece is with security, we are trusted to the things that we find to not share with the world. And if someone can't trust you to operate in that kind of space, then you will never get to work in this space.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You have to have uh, quite a high level of integrity when it comes to this because we do kind of hold some very sensitive things in our hands that could go really badly if it did fall into the wrong hands, which it does, but we don't want to help them. That's not our
Sure.
job. Our job is to stop them. So I'm glad to know that we're kind of on the same page with this. Is that I like how you put it. Find your tribe, network. This is why we love conferences so much. Go to conferences. I know it can be like a really big expense, especially if you have to fly and then get the ticket and hotels and all that. But it's really worth it to try to start squirreling away some money and find yourself at a really good conference because from there the sky is the limit. You start meeting people, conversating with people, networking, building contacts, and the next thing you know, that can be a really big step to get you into cybersecurity. All right. That said, I want to go to the next question because I think this is probably, I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and tip my cards here. I think this is the most important question that anybody
Okay.
could have asked. This comes from YouTube. It comes from the user Mike Saunders. He asked, Jason, what is the most, or who is the most charming person on the Red Siege team and why is it him?
So for those that may not be aware, Mike Saunders is the principal consultant at Red Siege. And for all intents and purposes, Mike is who I would go to if I would ever have a technical problem that we were just all stumped on. Mike is the most experienced. Mike should theoretically be the smartest. And what makes Mike charming is even when he knows he's way smarter than me, he will absolutely sort of talk down to my level and never ever make me feel guilty about asking questions. Because Mike knows deep down that if I get better, it makes the team better, and then eventually it makes himself better. So Mike is actually just really selfish. I think that's what that means, right?
We had Mike on All Things Cyber, and he was a lot of fun. He is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. But he strikes me almost as like Gandalf, right? He is the keeper of all things, but like you said, he still has a spot in his heart for you, and he doesn't want you to feel bad about yourself if you didn't know something. And he's always just so helpful. If you ask him a question, he spent time with me. I kind of sidewalled him off on at Wild West Hacking Fest last year and was like, "Hey, I got some questions. Do you mind talking to me about?" Took the time. We sat there and chewed the fat for a good 20, 30 minutes on some really technical topics. And he just gave me all the time he could. And he is a super cool guy. Enjoy Mike. And one day we'll have to have him back on. Mike, so if I know you're listening, get a calendar date, contact Kathy. You know what to do. We'll get you back on the show. All right, let's move on now that we've had a Mike Love Fest for long enough. Let's see here. Our next question is from Robert on Zoom. And he asks, earning my CCNA now. So apparently he's in the middle of working on that CCNA. In your opinion, what is the best way into cybersecurity field after that? So he gets his CCNA and now he's ready to pivot into cybersecurity. What do you think would be his best next step?
So sort of walking that same route, go this CCNA into a network admin job and eventually otherwise. I think you're on a very great step. So one thing that I preach very heavily is learning network fundamentals. And I believe that should be done by everybody, not only in security, but in technology in general. I don't know if you guys can see, but like literally on my sign back here, I have segment your network.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because one of the things that shuts us down the hardest as attackers is a segmented network. If we can't reach other hosts, it doesn't matter that we're there because we can't go anywhere, right? Um, so earn your CCNA, master those networking fundamentals, and then start asking that question, right? So if somebody plugs a rogue device into, like a switch port in wherever you're working, what happens? What did you do to stop that? What could you have done to stop that? What happens if spanning tree protocol comes out like a port that's designated for a user workstation? Like, what could a person theoretically do to exploit spanning tree protocol? Start asking those kinds of questions, and that will sort of activate that security mindset. And I know Cisco has changed their certification. But I have CCNA security. It's now renamed to something different that I can't remember. But look at some of that content and see what they're preaching from kind of a network level.
Yeah, it could be
Um,
a good idea, like especially if you got that CCNA and you're in that Cisco world, you know iOS pretty well, and you know
mhm,
that all ports and or switches and port security and the things that are kind of built into that you will learn in CCNA. Firewalls. Cisco makes firewalls, and man, we need good firewall jockeys out there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
sure. Yeah, I was a firewall jockey for many years, and it was mission critical to the mega core I worked for's success. So it was needed. Um, I had another point, but I lost it. So we
Well,
can just keep
I'll
going.
jump in because to your point about learning those networking fundamentals, I cannot tell you honestly, and it's very interesting to me how often I get this question or,
Mhm.
"Hey, I tried to do something in your demonstration and it doesn't work." Well, what are you doing? I'm trying to get a Metasploit reverse shell. Okay. Do you have networking activity? Well, what do you mean? Like,
Yep.
can both machines actually talk to each other? Because we
Mhm.
want to start there. Because if they can't talk, it don't matter what you do. Ain't nothing gonna happen.
Absolutely.
And it's those networking fundamentals that I get it. You want to just run to the finish line and do all the fun, cool stuff.
Mhm.
But if you don't know how networks work and things go awry and they don't work, you're stuck. You're just sitting there
Absolutely.
going, I guess this didn't work. Maybe it did work. Maybe that Metasploit package is payload just fired right off, and it's just going. I just can't contact the server.
Mhm.
I wish I could. If I
Yep.
could, I'd make a connection. We'd have reverse shells all day, but I can't.
But I can't. Yep. Which, brings up a great point too, is in order for those of you that are looking to do like offensive security, right?
Yeah,
Before you can ever learn how to break something, you have to know how it works first. So whether you're starting off, like a CCNA in network land, or whether you want to learn Active Directory, or whether you're, being a web developer, like learning those fundamentals and how things actually work and how they work at a very high level, or not high as in like high skill level, will pay off dividends once you step into like an offensive security role.
oh yeah. Because if you don't know about the system you're trying to hack, you're gonna be like, I wonder what that is. That looks fun. I bet it's hackable, but I don't know what it does or how it works. And then
Yep.
once you have if you already have those fundamentals and you start learning the security skills and practices, tools and whatnot, you start going, oh, I see what they're doing because I know that this network thing works like this. And now things like SSH tunnels start to make sense and
Absolutely.
why that is obfuscated from traffic analysis and how packet sniffers work and how you could, well, if I can see the traffic, well, then, and of course, if this is a layer three, all the puzzle pieces just start to tumblers fall into place. So that's why it's very important. Learn those networking fundamentals, get that underneath your belt, and then you can start pivoting. And there's a lot of great stuff out there that you can pivot to. Jason's giving you a bunch
Absolutely.
of good
Yep.
stuff to think
Absolutely.
about. Now we got a kind of a fun question. I like this question because I have two of these things, and I've thought about doing kind of what you got going on there. This question comes from Megan at ACI Learning. She's one of our directors back there. She's asking, how many Funko Pops does Jason own, and which one is your favorite?
Ooh. So what had happened was it was like a year ago. My aunt gave me like two Funko Pops for my birthday,
Yeah,
and I immediately became obsessed. So yeah, you tell the wall behind me. So wherever you see a Funko Pop visible, there's actually two other ones behind it. So I think I'm coming up on around 500 or so.
oh my goodness.
Uh, yeah, I kind of got carried away.
So
I think
Jason's got a problem.
yeah. So I think my favorite one. I don't know if you can see it. Where is it? It's a My Pet Monster, which was a toy from when I was a kid, like the blue monster with the orange fangs and had the handcuffs
Nice.
on. There's a My Pet Monster or Funko Pop that's hidden back there somewhere. I think that's my favorite.
I have two Predator Funko Pops because I'm
Okay.
obsessed with Predator. And
There it is.
yeah,
Right. There's
they're
one
fun.
for everybody,
Yeah,
right? There's one
my
for
my
everybody.
son, he's two. He loves to reach up and go. He goes, he monster, he monster. I'm like, oh yeah, he's monster. You don't want to mess with him. He's bad,
Mm-mm.
bad man.
Not even a little bit. Nope.
All right, now that we've had a little fun, let's get back to these cybersecurity questions here. This one comes from Charles on LinkedIn. He asks, so Python or Bash or some coding is a plus. What about Splunk? Is that a necessary for getting into cybersecurity? Jason, what do you think? You think Splunk has become that ubiquitous thing now where you just got to know it? There's no getting around it.
So for what I do, absolutely not. I don't touch Splunk really ever as an offensive security person. I think if you were working in like a security operations center, something like Splunk would be pretty invaluable. Um, but Splunk is also like that's a vendor specific solution, right? There are other there are other solutions out there. So learning how a SIEM works and learning how to navigate the data and how that ingestion works and how to break it down, how to make a usable report and set up alerts. All that is insanely useful to anybody that's trying to defend from attackers. I mean, that's how we get caught. Is there's somebody that works in a SOC or some analyst somewhere that's like, okay, if I see 25 plus SQL authentication attempts on a host, send an alert to SQL admins and then myself. And learning how to do that kind of stuff, whether it's Splunk or a different SIEM, et cetera, that's how you catch bad guys. So absolutely, if you want to go the SOC route, learn some kind of SIEM, not necessarily Splunk.
Yeah, not necessarily Splunk, but right. There's plenty of them out there. I think that Splunk does offer some like free resources. So it's not a bad thing to go out there if you've got access to something free, get your hands on it and learn a bit about Splunk. They are widely accepted as one of the better solutions out there. So it won't hurt to learn a little
Absolutely.
bit of Splunk, but there
Yeah.
are plenty of other open source options out there that will give you a great experience. And you get to slap that on the old res and say,
Absolutely.
yep, I got me some of that seam experience and it's so good. I can help.
Yep.
I want to be a help. Just give me
Yeah.
that opportunity. Put me in the game, coach.
Yeah, and there's a resource out there called Detection Labs, and I think it's still being updated. But Detection Lab, it's a free resource where it's basically it's a Windows domain controller, a Windows workstation, and a Linux machine, and it makes them its own little mini network that you can deploy virtual machine wise, and so you can actually like launch attacks from the Kali image, and then see what that looks like on the seam, and then you can write your own kind of alerts and whatnot. It's been a bunch of years since I've played with it, but if you can find something like that, it really hits all the points home where you're getting your hands-on experience. You can speak to things that you've done and you can learn a ton along the way.
Oh man, we really live in a great time in a day and age where we have so many resources available. You mentioned Hack the Box. You got this one. We've got open source solutions, VMs that you can download and play with. Like there just is no excuse anymore for us to say, oh, I don't have any experience with that. Find out these are the normal things that look at job posts, kind of walk your way through a few of them, see what the recurring themes are in those job posts, and then get out there on the internet and find some way to get your hands on it or something like it so that this is not going to be a problem for you when it comes to experience. You should be able to have some experience with something along the same lines, if not the exact same thing nowadays. But
Right.
it is nice. Back when I was coming up, it was like, no, 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 no. This is for the select few that have the keys to the kingdom, and only if
Yeah, like
they are nice enough, they'll give it to you.
yeah. Like I remember having to buy like a used Cisco switch and two Cisco switches and a router and having to physically build that out. And it was loud on my desk and it was like $1,000 for all three of them. And now it's like, oh,
Yup.
there's like you can virtualize it for like $19 a month now. That would have been really
Oh, I'm
useful at
sorry.
the
What?
beginning, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, and of course, just even like defensive solutions or hacking solutions, man. That was stuff for corporations. That wasn't for Joe Blow on the street out there just trying to learn something. You had to try to get your hands on something, and maybe you knew somebody that was in the business and
Mhm.
go, "Hey, can I get a copy of that so I could get some hands on with that?" Now it's just get out there and grab it. They're more than happy to have you fill out your name and address and send you a link for a
Absolutely.
download. So definitely check that out. All right. Let's see here. Let's go back to Question City here and see what we got from the old chats. We've got Thomas from Zoom. Thomas says, I want to work in network security and system resource allocation on a company level network. What's a good starting point? Jason.
I'm gonna I'm gonna be hon I'm gonna be honest that I don't think I understand what system resource allocation is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a guess though. Um, so when I think of system resource allocations, I'm thinking of either A, there's a lack of people in skills,
Mm.
or B, there's a lack of solutions or a budget for solutions. Those are really where I see like where a lot of blue teams like really struggle with allocations. Um, and so for the first piece, it's learning how to level up, right? It's what can you do really on your nights and weekends to make yourself a better defender. Um, I say that the idea of nights and weekends might seem kind of painful, but everybody that works in cybersecurity and does well at it, we live that because the landscape changes all the time. And the second that we get lazy, that we get beat by an attacker who's a couple months of learning ahead of us, and our companies get owned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the second piece, right, is learning ways to not be dependent on multi-million dollar security solutions. Like you can sell the best product ever, but if it's just gonna sit there and no one's gonna monitor it, no one's gonna configure it, that really goes back to square one. Like you gotta level up, you gotta learn how the stuff works. And I know that's a constant battle for blue teams, and I'm so very happy I don't have to fight anymore.
Man, I'll tell you, I chose red team
Yeah,
because it was just more simple than it was. I'm like, these poor blue teamers over here. Hey, I'll say a prayer and light a candle because these people have a hard job because all I got to do is find
absolutely.
one spot where they missed it, and I
You know,
win. It's a little more easy for us.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, setting fires is way easier than putting out fires,
Yeah,
right? But I know we know we often we sell pen testing as like this hyper sexy, like it's just winning over and over and over.
yeah.
But I promise my face is actually slamming my head on his keyboard like as often as it was when I was a blue teamer. It's just a different kind of battle.
Yeah, yeah. But if you got that mentality where you can get laser focused on these kind of things when it's kind of like that nag, it won't leave you alone kind of thought process where I know I'm close to this and you just shut the world off and go down into your deep dark mind recesses and go, I'm going to figure this out. That's the kind of mentality that is going to make you very, very successful because you're going to learn a ton of
Mhm.
stuff because you can shut the whole world off and just focus in on learning those particular things and gaining those skills that you're going to need for those jobs. All right, let's go to one more from YouTube. Let's see what we got here. It's Daniel. Good name, Daniel. I like that. It's not me. This is not my question. He says, do you think cybersecurity has limitations as a career in general?
I mean, absolutely not, unless you like really want to work with your hands outside. Like that's the only thing.
Hmm.
I mean, to be honest, I spend a whole lot of time in this chair that you're looking at right now. I have the regular time for doing my job, and then I have whatever it takes on the nights and weekends to, try to get caught up and learn and continue to grow. But as far as like salary potential, I mean there's the ceiling, and maybe that looks like that eventually become a hands-off keyboard and become like a director or a CISO. Those are all security jobs too. And even outside of your keyboard stuff, I mean, there are countless other, there's project managers that work in cybersecurity. There's GRC people. There's policy people. It's where if you don't even really want to be a keyboard person, you can still work in cybersecurity and have a whole lot of options and places to go. I personally I travel a lot, and I really enjoy my time on the road, and I'm able to work in cybersecurity. And as long as I've got an internet connection, which is everywhere these days, I can keep my job going. And thankfully, I work for a company that doesn't overkill my time and gives me flexibility. So, like I said, I work from the same office you're looking at right now, and I mean, kind of the sky's the limit. There's a lot to be done in cybersecurity.
That's right. Lots of opportunity just waiting for you to
Mhm.
reach out and pluck it from the tree of opportunity, right? So definitely, right? There's lots of stuff that you can do. We don't want you to limit. The only limitation is yourself, honestly. You figure out what you want to do and you put your nose to the grindstone and you point your wagon toward it and you just start walking off in the distance. And eventually you will find yourself there. I've told that advice to so many people and it works almost invariably. You are the biggest limitation to your success in this. You just got to want it and go for it, and you'll get there one day. All right, that
Absolutely.
takes us to our new section here on All Things Cybersecurity, which is rapid fire questions. All right, with rapid fire questions, what we're going to do is we're going to put 5 minutes on the clock, and we're going to give Jason 30 seconds to answer every question he can within that 5 minutes. So once 30 seconds is up, we're moving on to the next question. I will cut you off, Jason, so you better make them brief.
Yep. Stretching, deep breath now.
That's right. Deep breath. Are you ready to rock? All right, let's hit you with the first question. We got, what is your primary method of approaching a cybersec problem? Top down or bottom up?
Definitely top down. I want to be able to understand something at a very high level and what it's actually encompassing. The idea of trying to go down a deep rabbit hole first without knowing the full scope of something I think is a mistake, because you might end up down a rabbit hole and waste a whole day and a half and realize you're actually looking at the wrong thing. So not only understanding how something works, but knowing what it's a part of is absolutely critical when trying to either exploit something or secure something.
Awesome answer. Let's go to Carrie from YouTube. Asks, I'm going to take my Sec Plus test soon, and then what do I need to obtain a job?
So definitely spend some time and build out that lab, right? Daniel mentioned earlier where look at a couple job postings and see what they're looking for and the skills that they're after, and then lab some of that stuff and build it. Also, don't underestimate the power of a good resume. If you know someone that has interviewed in the past, have them look at your resume, cater your resume towards every job posting, sort of pull keywords and make them match. You got to get past that HR person before you get to a hiring manager.
Excellent answer. We've got Andrew from YouTube asks, how close are we to IT or becoming passwordless? Will this solve current issues?
I don't think that we're anywhere close to IT becoming passwordless, for the sheer fact that the amount of legacy stuff that still exists on a normal corporate network is kind of scary. I won't talk about it right now because I only have 19 more seconds, but it's out there, right? So even if a great passwordless solution came out tomorrow and it was actually the answer, we wouldn't see any real implementation for another 10 years or so. And while it may solve it in its current form, there will always be authentication issues to solve, even if we go passwordless.
Indeed. Usama from Zoom asks, earning my CCNA now, want to become an ethical hacker. Should I get into networking job or go for CEH next?
So I also have a CEH. I personally didn't think it was worth it. And then the amount of money that it takes to get an upkeep is very high. So I would think that you should go ahead and get your CCNA and then go ahead and get your networking job. Number one, that's probably going to be a pay boost. You can put that pay towards more security training and resources. Number two, you get on the job experience. And then number three, you're really learning how networks work and therefore learning how to break them.
All right. Kingdom from YouTube asks, why do you believe cybersecurity professionals are so high in demand?
So high in demand because the skill set is just really hard to find. There's a whole lot of excited people out there that want to learn, but there's far less people that are actually putting in the nights and weekends and the time to get skilled. And then also with the fact that the environment changes so often, you can be an expert in 2023, and if you stop learning, you might be worthless in 2025. So there's always turnover, there's burnout. People, it's hard to keep up, and because of that, there's just always the need for people.
Great answer. Ryan from Zoom asks, I'm in a new internal pen testing role. What do you recommend to succeed in the beginning stages of this type of role?
Be a sponge. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I made the joke about Mike and me going to him all the time earlier, learn from more experienced people. Don't be afraid to admit that you're wrong, and definitely ask questions if you think you might actually break something, because taking down your environment might be a resume changer. Grow, stay hungry, stay humble, and learn how to communicate.
All right, and our last question comes from Ash from Zoom. I've been an IT support tech for 5+ years. How can I become a cybersecurity specialist within 6 months?
So I would go pick out what job role you're really after. I would see what skills are looking for. I would get a whiteboard and write down the things that you need to know and just start checking them off your list, and figure out what's going to be easiest for you, what you feel like your background lends to the best, and really specialize there. If you've never been a programmer before, I probably wouldn't start with programming. If you've got some network fundamentals, maybe start there. Make your weakest thing the last on the list, because you got a limited time frame.
All right. 5 minutes. Man, you cranked through those great answers, Jason. I was actually fairly impressed with your ability to keep it within that 30 seconds with quality, useful answers. So good job, man. I hope that those people that wrote those questions in really got what they were looking for out of that. And that's the whole thing here, right? That's what All Things Cyber is all about, is us just trying to get through all this information, try to get it from us to you so that you can be more successful. But guess what? All good things, right? They do come to an end. Jason, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of promote yourself. Where are you going to be? What are you going to do? How can people connect with you? Go for it.
All right. So for those of you that are in the Salt Lake area, I will be speaking at a conference called SateCon. It's October 24th to the 27th. I'll be doing a live presentation there. Definitely check us out at all the Red Siege stuff. redsiege.com/Discord. You talk about building your tribe and interacting with people. You can come hang out and just ask us questions and meet other people that are trying to do the same thing. Every Wednesday, we also have something called the Wednesday Offensive, where every Wednesday we have a new guest come on that talks about a cybersecurity topic. It's 30 minutes. We turn on our cameras and we just have a conversation about it, and anybody's welcome to join. You can find out more information at redsiege.com/WEDOFF, Wednesday wed off. And then lastly, if you work in education or have a class or school, I will absolutely talk to whatever cyber club or programming, or not programming class, not a programmer, but like networking class or whatever, for absolutely free. You're more than welcome to, find me on Twitter at hackandbackpack, or you can email me at jason@redsiege.com, and I will be happy to share whatever I know with whoever asks.
Well, Jason, sir, you rock, man. You're a great guest. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you having you on and all your great information that you dealt out today, man. It's a great resource. That said, it looks like we are out of time, man. I hate to say it, but we're going to call it a day. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, keep hacking.